It's been so long. As I've made inherently clear in my past video essays, gaming is an amazing creation. Its contribution to society is insurmountable. It combines math, technology, and science with the art of storytelling. The story of how it got to our consoles, the story of a character we resonate with, or the story of our lives. Every aspect of this field reflects every aspect of us. That's powerful. Nothing negates that, but every beautiful thing can become corrupted. How does a perfect thing become corrupted though? Is it outside influence? Does it implode from the inside out? Or is it some mix of both? My past two video essays have touched on this a little bit. One story about a creator that became so infatuated with monetization and success, he forgot why he created video games in the first place. And another story about how corporations ruin the art of video games. Gaming by itself has been tied to different narratives over the years. Typically, the media ties it to crime, blaming it for carjackings and gun violence. Hopefully, we're all at the point where we can agree that's some BS though, and if you're not there yet, you are definitely not ready for the rest of this video. Rhetoric like that from media is simply a wedge issue, a distraction. It has no merit except to deflect from how to truly solve those issues. Instead of giving poorer people more opportunities, it's much easier to blame it on GTA 5 roleplay. Silly, but easy, and you bet a bunch of yees on Facebook are going to perpetuate that narrative. The truth that the media doesn't hyper-focus on are the true issues with the gaming community. The rampant toxicity and misogyny. Online gaming has been used since its inception to anonymously spread hate to brown and black gamers. Games like COD have a known culture of racism. Like, we as gamers always joke that you can't go into a COD lobby without hearing someone say the N-word. With a hard R. It's expected, and it wouldn't be the same experience without it. That's the reason I'm kind of scared to play Valor without friends, because you never know what those hoes are gonna say. I joke to get through the pain, but it's a serious issue that we truly never acknowledge, let alone try to fix. It's become yet another space where black gamers have had to be reminded of their powerlessness in this country and just laugh it off because some random white guy with a dank microphone thinks it's fun to say the N-word. Not as easy of a subject to cover, huh? Read about the history of harassment that female devs working at huge corporations have had to face. One of the most recent settlements was just resolved last year, but the harassment goes back a decade. At Activision's Blizzard, there were repeated reports of sexual harassment and discrimination. When the company was investigated, they discovered a frat boy-like environment where male employees openly joked about rape and drunk employees went on cube crawls harassing employees. The case settled for $18 million to repay former employees for sexual harassment and workplace discrimination. Remember, this was the most recent case out of a domino effect of the same behavior. Riot Games was the first to be investigated in 2019 after the gaming website Kotaku looked behind the curtain. $10 million in damages for gender discrimination and sexual harassment. Then the next year, Ubisoft is accused of harassment and discrimination at their Toronto and Montreal offices, Common Canada L. Several senior employees resign and the CEO pledges to reform the company. I feel like a broken record, and if you ask me, one case is too many, yet we have 3 cases from 3 major companies that have harassment spanning for years, some as long as a decade. This rabbit hole then led me to the infamous GamerGate. GamerGate is regarded as the origin of the harassment. I only just learned about it a few months ago, even though I've been on the internet for way too long. I've seen some things, yet this passed me by. Maybe I was too young to recognize the culture that was being created at the time, but it's a culture that would go on to influence not just the gaming community, but every inch of the internet. Let's go back to when Blizzard's harassment began, 2013, and we'll be met with a young dev by the name of Zoe Quinn. They release a video game by the name of Depression Quest, and online freaks will do what they do best and freak out. Soon become the subject of a blog post, multiple accusations, and years of life-threatening harassment. How did one game flip the entire internet upside down, causing a ricochet of toxicity not only in the form of sexual harassment, but eventually evolving into just downright fascism? Now, that's a question media outlets are not ready to ask. They can't even talk about police brutality without getting on their hands and knees for police officers at least once. Well, that's the question I seek to, and I'm beautiful and brave enough to actually answer. Now, I briefly introduced the beginning of GamerGate, but why don't we expand upon it a little bit, learn a bit. Is that okay? Cool. Like I said, Zoe Quinn released Depression Quest, but why did they? Well, Depression Quest was a text-based game that was made to capture Quinn's real-life experience with depression. The player could experience fictional scenarios throughout the game, putting them in the shoes of someone who has to battle this every day. The game actually received very positive reviews from gaming media outlets, but those online freaks that I mentioned earlier had some serious issues with it. They criticized the game for skewing too far away from traditional video games that featured violence and for focusing too much on political intrusion. What the hell? Why aren't I killing random brown people in Afghanistan, which definitely doesn't have political undertones? What were the political intrusions they were so mad about? Quinn being a femme-presenting person? I don't know. The controversy really exploded when Quinn's ex, Erin Gioni, wrote a blog post spilling the tea on Quinn's past. He wrote in detail about the relationship and breakup, including personal information like text messages, emails, and chat logs. Why would you post your L's like this? To take down the woke mob. The big juicy tea that really sealed the deal was an accusation that Quinn exchanged a sexual relationship with Kotaku gaming reporter Nathan Grayson for a positive review on Depression Quest. Aaron later admitted that he had no actual evidence, but by then his blog had been posted to 4chan and used to invigorate an entire hate campaign. So good job, Aaron. You did great, buddy. Quinn then had to deal with months of threats and doxing from unhinged online psychopaths. These threats put their family and everyone around them at risk. The attacks were then amplified when the actor Adam Baldwin coined the term GamerGate on Twitter, giving the movement a name and pushing it further into 4chan, image boards, and Reddit, where Quinn's nude photos and personal info were being circulated. Less than 4 months after GamerGate began, Quinn's record of threats they had received had grown thousandfold. At a conference, Quinn said, "I used to go to game events and feel like I was going home. Now it's just like, are any of the people I'm currently in the room with ones that said they wanted to beat me to death?" The harassment eventually became so bad, Quinn had to flee their house. Very quickly, this cry for less wokeness in video games became a life-threatening personal attack, and it wasn't stopping there. Anita Sarkeesian was a feminist media critic famous for having a YouTube series called Tropes v. Women in Video Games. In the series, she analyzed the history of sexist portrayals in popular games and their overall impact. On August 24, 2014, she uploaded a new episode to the series, and the same online freaks started to attack Anita. Out of nowhere, she was receiving death threats, rape threats, and being doxxed online. Similar to Quinn, the harassment got so bad she felt entitled to flee her home. At the XOXO Arts and Technology Conference in Portland, Oregon, she said, in regard to the accusations that high-profile women were making up the threats against them, that one of the most radical things you can do is actually believe women when they talk about their experiences. The perpetrators, Sarkeesian went on to say, do not see themselves as perpetrators at all. They see themselves as noble warriors. And it still doesn't stop there. Brianna Wu, rape threats, death threats, doxxed, had to flee her home, and as a result, the harassment was diagnosed with PTSD. Phil Fish, Felicia Day, all of them were attacked after speaking out against Gamergate. This hate campaign was proving to be an unstoppable force against anyone who had a position against them. It sent a message to everyone involved that you either shut up or have your life ruined. It even got to the attention of billionaire and real-life Eggman Mark Andreessen, who offered $10,000 for information leading to a conviction for the people who were behind the harassment. Not only him, but Will Wheaton, NFL player Chris Clue, and Stephen Colbert criticized the movement, bringing it to the public. This is no longer something left in the depths of the darkest places of the internet. It was a worldwide issue. It's easy to think that subreddits and online forums have no power, especially politically and socially. These are but small forums where random people share racist memes with each other. But even as of late, subreddits have been involved in the leaking of subjects as big as classified military documents. These subjectively powerless areas of the internet can create waves in the real world. The Gamergate community was very calculated about their attacks. They realized early on that as a collective, they had real power. And the way they presented their message could only increase their influence. To a mainstream audience, they tailored their cause in a more palatable way. Doxing and sharing non-consensual nudes to normal people could be a lot. So for the public consumption, they focus more on the personal grudges they had against their victims. Americans tend to naturally lean more right, so as long as you appeal to their existing biases and slowly bring them into the fold by amplifying their grievances, letting them know this affects you too, then you've created an unstoppable force. It's no different than Trump and his supporters. Once they're fully radicalized, you can easily expose them to your sick and twisted ways, encouraging them to join in on the attacks, the doxing, the release of personal info, the life-threatening stuff. Really, a normal person who had no interest in being involved in your cause is a loyal soldier. And by September of 2014, only a month after the attacks on Anita, 1 million people had already tweeted using hashtag GamerGate. Brianna Wu, shortly after becoming a target of harassment, stated that Twitter facilitated harassment by the ease with which anyone can make a new account, even after having an earlier account blocked, and challenged the service to improve its responsiveness to complaints. These new accounts, called sock accounts, perpetuate the hatred. Someone could tweet out blatant hate speech towards someone, get banned on Twitter, and then make an entirely new account in seconds, continuing what they had just started. I can only imagine how overwhelming these attacks were, the constant beratement, your life being threatened. Just listening to these stories, it breaks my heart. Nevertheless, they not only utilized sock accounts but deployed several other tactics to grow their movement. They successfully removed ads from sites critical of GamerGate, donated to organizations that were clear enemies of their victims, created a feminist character rooted in misogyny and rape culture, and created another hashtag not your shield, to show female devs and gamers where their place was in this industry. I went through an entire Wikipedia article and several others surrounding everything these psychopaths did. I would go into detail about all the ways they radicalized people and the unhinged ways they carried out their attacks, but we would be here forever. The minute details are not the important part. What's important is the effect their message had on the public and their victims. Every action they took was a clear statement. You have no power. I think the Wikipedia article said it best. GamerGate has been described as a culture war over cultural diversification, artistic recognition, feminism in video games, social criticism in video games, and the social identity of gamers. Beautifully said. This movement capitalized on the rising concerns of social justice warriors, individuals who unknowingly push their views onto others. They had the best of intentions but just didn't always know how to adequately speak about their views without coming off as pretentious to others. To especially already right-leaning young men, these SJWs only justify their views. The GamerGate community utilized those frustrations, made those people feel like victims, and then gave them a place to feel powerful again. This movement perfectly coincided with the conservative political agenda. Vulnerable individuals could obviously be convinced to do anything as long as it gave them something to fight for. The far right would use this to their advantage. Soon GamerGate would go from fighting against feminist devs to a violent political movement that would put not only regular people at risk, but big corporations. And you know what they say, screw over the poor man and get rich. Screw over the rich and get absolutely cum-stirred. This was not ending anytime soon. 2015, YouTube was already established as a major platform. By that year, YouTube had created mega e-celebs and expanded the way we consume and are influenced by content. During its decade-long run, YouTube garnered the interest of multiple other corporations like NBC and obviously Google. Without those associations, YouTube's success would have been short-run, especially since we live in the great free country of America. Corporations are king, and with YouTube receiving fat funding from Big Daddy Googs, YouTube's reach has become insurmountable. In fact, as of March 2023, YouTube is the second most viewed site after Google. Get fricked, Suckington. YouTube has about 2 billion active users and 122 million people visit YouTube every day. That's nearly half of the United States. That's the size of our Lord and Savior Japan. Yet for a site that has this much influence over the global footprint, they constantly abuse their power. Whether it be through their broken content ID system, favoring the interest of mega corporations and advertisers over the betterment of their own creators, or what we will cover today, leading people further down the alt-right rabbit hole. YouTube is powered heavily by an algorithm. That content ID I just mentioned, algorithm. recommending you hundreds of videos. That's the algo. This very same tool that is instrumental to the core workings of the site is also regularly and intentionally used for bad. I would say GamerGate was the height of that evil. YouTube has regularly been accused of algorithm amplification, specifically of conspiracy videos. These videos include great and intelligent ideas like 9/11 conspiracies and more recent COVID fallacies. According to Politico, the foundation, a nonprofit that advocates on privacy issues, found in 2021, 71% of all videos that volunteers reported as disturbing were recommended by the video sharing platform's algorithm. This also included white supremacy content. This is a popular strategy social media websites use where they intentionally don't moderate or promote radical ideals to boost their platform. As I said in my video on the supposed banning of TikTok, we are all unhinged. We love drama and are attracted to the flashing lights and colors that come with this sort of content. Facebook has been accused of allowing absolutely depraved, disturbing content, and TikTok is currently in the era of promoting conspiracy theories. Our brother in Christ, Markiplier, was so infatuated with this side of YouTube that he made a yearly series where he tested the YouTube algorithm to see if it would lead him down this conspiracy theory pipeline, and no surprise, it did. More so the first year he tested it, and then it marginally improved year after year. But like we just discovered with the Political article, this is still very much an issue. The only reason why YouTube ever tried to mask the issue of promoting white supremacists and absolutely unhinged content, because believe me, YouTube in 2015 was way worse than COVID conspiracies. But the only reason why it masked it was because, similarly to what Twitter is going through now, advertisers started to pull out. And no, I'm not talking about what I did to your mom last night. They started playing with YouTube's coins. This is what we call the ad apocalypse. GamerGate played a huge role in the apocalypse, but racist, crazed content existed way before Zoe Quinn's Depression Quest. The beginning of YouTube saw the rise of some of the biggest creators on the platform. Creators like Shane Dawson, PewDiePie, Jeffree Star, the Fine Bros. YouTube was creating stars by the second. All of these creators captivated audiences with funny skits or react content, whether in the form of gaming or in video. They all seized this era of untouched creativity on the quickly exploding site. But you know what else they seized? The chance to be racist. Now, none of this information is new. There have been other creators that have gone to great detail about all the crazy things some of these people have said and did and still do. I'm not here to do that. Rather, I want to use this to contextualize the events that led up to the apocalypse and why advertisers pulled out so quickly. Also, don't want to focus too heavily on creators that have sincerely changed for the better like iDubbbz, as once again I'm here to give context, not unnecessarily go back into people's past. Many content creators that did sketches weren't actually funny, and so they had to rely on bigotry to make themselves appear funny. They saw a button and they pressed it again and again and again. This came in the form of blackface or racist depictions of Asian people or Latinos. If you go back and watch these videos, it honestly feels like you're going back to the 30s or something. It's just a straight up minstrel show. For a lot of creators, this old school style racism continued into the height of GamerGate, bringing along sexism with it. A lot of gaming YouTubers played into the get politics out of my game rhetoric. When they saw a woman character, they cringed in fear and broke out in hives. A lot of big YouTubers were contributing to the rhetoric GamerGate started, and the algorithm was rewarding them for it. Many of these videos exploded in popularity because of the controversy and conversations they started. These creators fed into this machine, some even pushing it further with near white supremacist rhetoric. YouTube was signaling that being edgy filled the bank until they learned the hard way that being edgy was unsustainable. The first adpocalypse can be traced back to 2016, but it didn't hit YouTube hard until February 2017. Many people believe PewDiePie's content during this time was one of the main catalysts. Of course, there are a lot of white supremacist content exploding on the internet, but Pew's content highlighted the issue. Someone with that big of an influence was joking about killing Jewish people and harking back to a lot of Nazi rhetoric. It was dangerous. iDubbbz highlighted in his recent video a really important point. Whether these creators actually believed the things they were saying was a non-factor. It's the harassment and the aftermath, the spread of this ideology from figures that a lot of people looked up to. That was the real issue. Brands like Coca-Cola, Dr. Pepper, Johnson & Johnson, even the UK government, the biggest brand in them all, pulled ads from the site. By the summer of 2017, ads had dwindled and the remaining ones were pushed to family-friendly content, causing a lot of frustration within the community. All creators were being punished because a good chunk of their peers didn't have the decency to learn how to actually be funny. This was when YouTube began to push television media to the top of the trending page and fundamentally changed the way creators were monetized. This adpocalypse heavily influenced the way modern YouTube looks. Little to no cussing in videos, creators getting demonetized for the stupidest things, all the restrictions, blame 2017. Platform would go on to have 3 more adpocalypses. The next 2 are not so important. The second involved Logan Paul's Japan vlog and dead people being shown to children, and the third resulted from a creator named Matt What It Is accusing YouTube's algo of promoting a softcore pedo ring and then inciting his audience to get advertisers to pull out. Yeah, other creators were pissed about that one. All these creators' actions resulted in harsher policies for other innocent creators as Big Daddy YouTube tried desperately to hold on to the approval of the corporate overlords. Like, why can't you people be normal? We pick up at the 4th and final recorded apocalypse. It began on May 24th, 2019. 2 years after disturbing right-wing content incited the first, this one would prove YouTube was still tolerating the same BS. Vox reporter Carlos Manza began contacting YouTube demanding that they demonetize and stop hate speech on the platform after conservative comedian and online talk show host Steven Crowder repeatedly made jokes at Manza's expense based on his ethnicity and sexual orientation.
But for years, he says he's been mocked by Crowder for being gay and Hispanic.
The stuff he was saying had nothing to do with my political views. He was calling me a lispy queer and a sprite and a fairy, and he called me a gay Mexican, and he would routinely make fun of the way that I spoke and just do gay impressions. He made kind of gruesome sexual comments about me.
Maza says he tried to deal with the abuse privately and flagged the videos to YouTube, but claims the company did nothing. So Maza edited together some of the clips where Crowder mentioned him and tweeted it. YouTube has since released a lengthy statement saying that while, quote, individually the flagged videos did not violate our community guidelines, however, in the subsequent days, we saw the widespread harm to the YouTube community resulting from the ongoing pattern of egregious behavior, took a deeper look, and made the decision to suspend monetization. Quote, in order to be considered for reinstatement, all relevant issues with the channel need to be addressed, including any videos that violate our policies, as well as things like offensive merchandise, the statement read in part. Crowder has also been removed from the YouTube Partner Program. Crowder did not respond to InsideEdition.com's request for comment, but addressed YouTube's decision on his show. He said that his comments were harmless, and he is a victim of forces that seek to silence him.
Keep in mind, for context, out of those thousands of videos, at least a few hundred are ours.
Yeah.
They didn't make a delineation between white supremacist and jokes.
Yeah, because Steven Crowder is the farthest thing from a white supremacist. This call out resulted in several other right-wing channels having their monetization banned completely, including Steven Crowder, who still hasn't been reinstated. He will never stop being racist. Honestly, the man got offered $50 million and then denied it. If you can afford to turn down that much money, I don't think a little bit of AdSense is gonna matter that much to you. This led to outrage amongst the conservatives who screamed and cried about how YouTube had a bias against them, or maybe Vox just wants to get rid of their competition. All terrible claims. YouTube let disgustingly racist content like the ones you perverts make fester for years, knowing full well of your existence. If they were really concerned with getting rid of you or had some bias, they would have gotten rid of you before someone complained about it. Once again, it messed with their pocketbook, and we can't have that. No, no, no. Going further into Steven Crowder and his relationship with YouTube, he himself has admitted that YouTube has a set of rules, and if he were to tailor his videos to those rules, similar to Ben Shapiro, he would be reinstated. The question I asked when hearing this is why YouTube is so lenient with such a liability. I honestly find it insulting how much these companies waver when it comes to their policies. YouTube will ban Andrew Tate, but won't ban an equally influential figure like Steven Crowder that doesn't just insinuate racist, homophobic talking points, but just blatantly says the quiet part out loud. Does that not go beyond your community guidelines? And if not, why? So GamerGate has come and gone. Its influence on the online space has radicalized hundreds, if not thousands of individuals, spreading misogynistic, right-wing ideals. It manifested itself in the form of videos from popular creators, evolving into this ever-turning and stoppable dogma. So what has it evolved into? What is the modern form of this 2015 beast? About a year ago, there was a figure who exploded on the scene carrying this rhetoric and exposing it to Gen Z. If you missed the first one, he was gonna make sure you got a taste. Andrew Tate, a former kickboxing champion who went on to become a media personality. He made his rounds on reality TV, desperate to keep his name in the public, but truly struck gold when he created a multi-level marketing scheme by the name of Hustlers University and got his followers to do his dirty work on TikTok. Honestly, I don't want to talk about him too much. I'm extremely tired of hearing of his name. Every time I see him mentioned anywhere, I'm like, please, no more. We get it. You know who he is. I know who he is. The more interesting part is the phenomena of radicalization he created on the internet. Whether it was children in middle school or grown men who act like children in middle school, he can die knowing his greatest accomplishment was creating the modern GamerGate and also getting arrested for sex trafficking. What a great legacy. Andrew Tate created an army of fans, mostly children, that did as he did. In their eyes, he was their idol. Everything he did was correct and he could truly do no wrong. If he jumped, they would too. These children terrorized their teachers, parents, and other classmates. Online, even after Tate had severely fallen off, they harassed streamers and kept his message alive through comment sections. If there's anything I'll give Tate, it's that he's very calculated. He infiltrated Twitch, constantly appearing on Aiden Ross's streams and influencing people to join him through that audience. Aiden's fans over time became his fans. He even manipulated Aiden, who was too dumb or didn't care to notice that he was using him purely for personal gain. Through the TikToks, through Twitch, there is now this subset of insecure men who believe berating people and becoming incels is the way to be alpha. All the while, the man who they idolize monetarily exploits them. I can't fully give Tate props as misogyny has been a thing for centuries. Sorry, my bro, but you're not original. I hate to say it, but the 1500s did misogyny way better. Let's be honest, you can never compete. Also, before Tate got on the scene, there were those fake podcasts like Fresh and Fit and others who did the same thing. Bring women on, tell them they're nothing without a man, blows up on the internet, and every incel with a phone goes crazy over it. Although those guys have fallen off a bit, but it's not a new formula. However, through the W community, even with Tate becoming less relevant, the sentiments he preached were still left alive. Now Aiden's community is full of Tate riders who will out-argue you by spamming L nerd if you disagree. Truly a great counter. But through Tate's influence, Aiden was quickly changing himself, shaving his head, becoming more and more emotionally unstable, and finally moving off of Twitch, platforming Nazis and spreading transphobia. Maybe it was always within him, but one figure was able to activate this hateful, disgusting, attention-seeking, although he's always been that last one, side of him. To connect this to our previous YouTube conversation, the GamerGate incel-style harassment was now leaking over to the streaming space, proving that many creators were still using hate and controversy to stay relevant. As creators like Aiden descend into madness, so do a slew of kids, together becoming increasingly more radical. We still haven't learned, even after a decade of experiencing the danger of this rhetoric creates. There are still creators who don't care, normies who don't care, and especially platforms who don't give a shit. I will say the internet's overall tolerance of this has changed since 2014. Gamergate and its effects festered at their height for like 3 whole years, whereas figures like Aiden Ross, Nico, and even the top G himself were quickly thrown to the side after only a few months. So I guess that's a win. But does that mean we become less brain broken? No, I don't think so. We still dox people, harass people. When it gets bad, it gets bad. It just passes sooner, I guess. White supremacy is still spread like wildfire on the internet. On a political level, we're moving toward fascism in some states. At the end of the day, no matter how much these platforms like YouTube and TikTok try to frame themselves as liberal or that they care about marginalized communities, they continuously show how they will tolerate the harm of them unless it removes dollars from their pockets. Fundamentally, nothing has changed. Now, we understand the platform's contribution to all of this, but what about the pipeline? In the intro, I mentioned GamerGate went from hating feminism in video games to becoming a downright fascist, and that was not an exaggeration. As I said, Aiden Ross on multiple occasions platformed literal Nazis on his streams. So in our scenario, let's say there's an innocent high school kid who has been watching Aiden for years. Maybe there's a period of time where he watched other gamers on YouTube like PewDiePie. So now it's 2023 and they've seen Aiden dissolve into this right-wing freak and they're still hooked. They're writing for Tate, they're defending Aiden, been exposed to Nick Fuentes. How's that influence turn dangerous? For one, there is documentation of gamers just like this kid being targeted by the far right. In England, games like Roblox and Minecraft were used by extremists to convert kids. Roblox, according to The Guardian, Tech Against Terrorism researchers found users being invited to roleplay Anders Breivik 2011 attack on the Norwegian island Utøya. The 2019 mosque shootings in Christchurch, New Zealand, and the 2019 terrorist attack in El Paso. Minecraft was used to hide disturbing conversations alluding to attacks. By hiding in video game chats, they could avoid content moderation or it being found later. These extremists also appeal to the youth by hosting seemingly innocent Call of Duty Warcraft tournaments. These events lured kids, slowly indoctrinating them. Young people have found a low-cost outlet to appear extreme and get disproportionate influence and fear in other members. It doesn't matter if it's a 13-year-old or a 30-year-old. He added, it's easy to dismiss as posturing, but these kids do damage. They run far-right campaigns, they produce propaganda, and they radicalize other kids. Gamers and extremists share online space as well. Both use forums like 4chan, Reddit, and Discord. It gives them a direct line of communication to pressure these kids. They are very specific with who they target too. Many of these kids who get involved don't have proper after-school programs or don't feel as if they have a real purpose in the world. As a Twitch streamer, Hassan Piker has said, it's a systematic issue that affects everyone involved. According to The Guardian, a former victim reported his personal odyssey took him from the violence-waging private Facebook group to the far-right Southeast Alliance to the fascist Britain First to the virulent anti-Muslim English Defense League. The same pipeline definitely exists in the US. If anything, it's probably worse. In America, there are several right-wing figures who spread Nazism, some of who I mentioned were on YouTube. I want to focus on two main figures I discovered who use the streaming space and youth culture to indoctrinate people using the same tactics as The Guardian reported in England. Baked Alaska is an interesting case. He actually fits perfectly in the conversation we've been having on GamerGate and this radicalization to the right that happened in 2016. Baked Alaska's internet footprint started off as a wannabe rapper, prankster, and an employee at BuzzFeed. During this time, he held more moderate political beliefs and actually marched in support of Black Lives Matter. But during GamerGate, the SJW's message of political correctness, coupled with Donald Trump, drew him to the right. That same radicalization I spoke about, these communities slowly bringing you into their community, applying their grievances to you, that radicalization led this man to becoming a white nationalist alt-right grifter. Dude, I just happened upon that information. I didn't even select him purposely in my outline for this argument before I wrote this. If you don't believe me after that serendipitous moment, girl, I don't know what to tell you. I would brand Alaska as less of a victim and more of a grifter because he has a history of flip-flopping between the right. At the beginning of 2019, he denounced the right, citing recent terrorist attacks as the reason. I think he thought this would give him more clout, but I guess he quickly realized that the money was in the right. Go woke, go broke, am I right? In November of the same year, he went back to being a Nazi, where he would live stream assaulting innocent bystanders, which would eventually result in him getting charged. And also he recently got arrested for live streaming at the Capitol on January 6th. He was sentenced to only 2 months. This is the same country that will throw people in jail for smoking weed for 3 times as long. That has a history of stacking unsolved cases onto black people, putting them in prison for life. I'ma say it. America deserved. So not only was Baked Alaska a part of the GamerGate radicalization, but he also used live streaming to spread the harassment of others. He streamed on a blockchain platform called DLive, so I can assume the people he would be radicalizing were crypto bros. Together they would go out into the streets and the audience members could play racist sound bites to everyone around. In the grand scheme, Baked Alaska is a pretty hidden figure. He streams on a pretty much unknown platform since he's been banned from YouTube. His Capital Right stream got 16,000, which is actually a lot in the realm of streaming, but it's also quite possible these were botted views as platforms like these typically have. He hasn't quite been able to infiltrate popular spaces while simultaneously cultivating these far-right audiences. Thankfully. Let's keep it that way. So that Nazi that Adin Ross was dumb enough to platform was a man named Nick Fuentes. You probably heard his name as he was closely involved in Ye's failed presidential campaign. I haven't heard much about that in like 6 months, but him being so closely involved with such a prominent figure put him in the eyes of people who would have never seen him. Now Adin Ross is showing his audience of 12-year-olds a literal Nazi. He called himself trying to debate him, but he was way too stupid to try and debate anyone. It's irresponsible to even try, but what do we expect from the bright and beautiful Adin? If you weren't aware, Nick Fuentes also streams his show America First, where he aims to make the Republican Party fascist. I also find people like him so funny because I think he's like Latino, but he believes white people are the superior race. It's really contrarian and stupid. Unlike Baked Alaska, he's had Republican senators attend his events. He has connections in the political sphere. That's why it's so dangerous and irresponsible for people like Adin to further platform him without at least properly countering and denouncing his beliefs. These young people in his audience that were already convinced to berate their teachers and moms are now exposed to this demon with talking points and experience in dog whistling white supremacy, something Adin is not equipped to combat. I can't emphasize how irresponsible that was. Adin has made several terrible decisions, but that one definitely takes the cake in my opinion. It's in our best interest to keep these ideologies from spreading further. It's entirely on platforms like Kick and all of their creators to not platform people as dangerous as that. And with popular content creators making the move to Kick, bringing their impressionable audiences over, the platform really needs to do better at regulating their content in several ways. Platforms shouldn't actively encourage young people to go down these rabbit holes and end up like those kids in the EDL, or the ones here in the US who champion the America First narrative. Unfortunately, many large platforms have a history of leading viewers towards conspiracies or even white supremacist disturbing content. So in a perfect world where capitalism doesn't get in the way of these platforms protecting their users, and yes, I realize those two things don't go together. Corporations protecting their consumers could never exist. But how do we fix the behemoth of a mess I just covered? Gaming is beautiful. In all 3 of my video essays, I've made a point to say that because it is true and will always be. But like a lot of avenues of interest, it has become tainted by evil people who seek to spread the hate and indoctrinate innocent people. And many have fallen victim to it. Some have come back, but some have devolved, going further and further into the alt-right rabbit hole. Unfortunately, the overlap of communication channels led to this community being exploited by several groups, all with the same interest to radicalize. These platforms and evil communities have created spaces where individuals go from a 2017 PewDiePie video to being members of white supremacist communities. The era of Gamergate and the resurgence of it has now created way too many opportunities for people to be constantly exposed to these ideologies. YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, all these platforms' actions have shown that they would gladly not regulate this hateful content if it weren't for it costing them advertisers. Especially with YouTube, they knew of the existence of these channels and yet continue to platform them until people complained. It's disgusting. So how do we fix this? Like with most issues in the Western world, I think it's a federal issue. The American government has to hold these corporations responsible for hate speech and the radicalization they promote. Once again, hard to imagine those two things together, but it is possible. Countries like Germany have regulation that targets fascism. After their pass, in the 50s, they amended Section 130 of the Criminal Code to specifically target anti-Semitic hate speech. According to PBS, it carries a sentence of up to 5 years in prison. I feel like if we were to do that in America, the hogs would go wild. Freedom of speech is a really big thing in America, and although the rest of the world will find it insane to want to uphold anti-Semitism and hate speech, I could definitely see that happening. But that would take America actually acknowledging their white supremacy, so I think it will definitely never happen. But that's what I propose. Acknowledgement and action on a federal level to protect all people from this ideology. Germany also struggled with fascism, but they made a clear point to outlaw it. We should do the same. It would be harder to legislate GamerGate style rhetorics unless it gets really violent. Just an opinion about how women are beaches is probably not enough to go federal. That would take the actions of the platform and the community to hold those people accountable and denounce that sexist rhetoric. All in all, though, the truth is that the American government and these corporations don't care about changing any of that. Capitalism is king, and as long as the money keeps flowing, everything else is secondary. Platforms will continue to overlook these figures to spread hate as they did in GamerGate and as they do now. In our current system, the truth is we care more about profit than stopping the spread of hate speech or even protecting innocent children from radicalization. We can only hope and fight for a better world. One that allows women to express their experiences, one that allows minorities to have safe spaces, and one that doesn't seek to monetize the trauma of others. But until then, nothing will fundamentally change. I hope that you all enjoyed this one. It was probably a bit of a long one, but I was super interested in the history of GamerGate and how the entire movement still affects the way we view women and politics to this day. I also don't really hear the rabbit hole these platforms put you on discussed very often, but it's a real issue that we don't have protection against. I love this country so much. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed and see you later. Okay, bye.